Hello, people. Watchman blows the horn here. So, we continue with the third installment in the original spiritual Game of Thrones series. And in the last installment, we had a look at one of the entities who will be summoned at the end. We looked at the bee in the land of Assyria. As stated in Isaiah 7 verse 18, the two entities who will be summoned, the fly from Egypt and the bee from Assyria, the twins. In this installment, we will have a look at the fly, hidden in the furthest parts of the rivers of Egypt. As we discovered in the last installment, the true dimensions of Eden, the Garden of God, and outside of Eden, on either side, to the west and to the east, are two entities who will be summoned at the end. This verse gives us an idea as to this entity that dwells in the furthest parts of the rivers of Egypt. And it says, "But when the Pharisees heard it, they said, This fellow doth not cast out demons, but by Belzebob, the prince of the devils." Matthew 12, verse 24. So, this particular verse introduces us to this entity named Belzebob. And it suggests that this Belzebob is a prince of the devils, not a king, but a prince. Now, the word Belzebob, or Belzebob, Strong's H1176 from 1168 and 2070, Baal of the fly, Belzebob, a special deity of the Ekronites, Belzebob, Strong's H1168, H2070. Use: proper name, masculine, Greek Strong's G954, Baal-zebob, Lord of the Fly, a Philistine deity worshipped at Ekron. So, and Jesus knew their thoughts, and said unto them, Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation. A bit like Babylon, USA. And every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. Matthew 12, verse 25. And if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand? And if I by Belzebob cast out devils, by whom do your children cast them out? Therefore they shall be your judges. Matthew 12, verse 26 to 27. Now, Jesus makes a very interesting statement here. He says this, but if I cast out devils by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God is come upon unto you. Or else, how can one enter into a strong man's house? Now, this strong man's house is an allusion to Azazel, as we will see later. So, or else, how can one enter into a strong man's house and spoil his goods, except he first bind the strong man? So, there's a reference here to the strong man being bound, and then he will spoil his house. Very interesting. So, Jesus is linking the idea of this strong man to this entity known as Belzebob, the Lord of the Fly, Lord of the Flies, Prince of Devils. And he is suggesting a binding of this entity known as Belzebob. Very interesting indeed. Now, in the book of Jude, in chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, we are told the following: I will therefore put you in remembrance, though ye once knew this, how that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterwards destroyed them that believed not. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. There is this idea of binding again. So there are angels who are bound under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. So what is this reference to binding? And this reference to Egypt, the land of Egypt, the fly from the land of Egypt that seems to be bound. Where can we find the full story of this fly, this entity that is bound? And Enoch also the seventh from Adam prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed. and of all their hard speeches, which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Jude 1, verse 14 to 15. Enter the Leviticus 16 ceremony. And he shall take 2 goats and present them before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And Aaron shall cast lots upon the 2 goats, one lot for the Lord, and the other lot for the, it says here scapegoat, but it's actually the Azazel goat. And Aaron shall bring the goat upon which the Lord's lot fell, and offer him for a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell to be the scapegoat, the Azazel goat, shall be presented alive before the Lord to make an atonement with him, and to let him go for a scapegoat, Azazel goat, into the wilderness. Leviticus 16, verses 7 to 10. So, this ceremony on the Day of Atonement, the casting of lots, to choose one goat to be the Lord's goat, which was to be sacrificed, and the other goat, which was to be Azazel's goat, which was to be taken into the wilderness and bound. So, Azazel, the Azazel goat, an alternate spelling of Azazel. He is said to have cohabited with Naamah, Lamech's daughter, Genesis 4, verse 19 to 22. And their children were known as the Shedin clan of Nephilim. After the flood, the Shedin were venerated by the Assyrians as guardian spirits. Azazel, which means God strengthens. You see the reference to the strong man earlier by Yeshua? So Azazel, a mighty fallen angel who is referred to as the scapegoat in Leviticus 16 verse 8. He was the leader of the second rebellion and is chained under the valley of Beit Hadudu until Judgment Day. Ancient church fathers Irenaeus referred to him as that fallen yet mighty angel, the strong man. The ancient rabbis stated he was the chief of the Benai Elim. They were also called the Shedim, lower angels, or men spirits. So by all accounts, it seems Azazel is the same as Belzebob, another entity with many names. Azazel, the demon, the goat demon, the bearer of transgressions, wrongdoing, or sins. So, Remember this incident? Yes. Well, in effect, what was happening here was an enactment of the ceremony of Yom Kippur. You see, lots were cast to all intents and purposes. The people were asked to choose who was to be the sacrificial goat and who was to be the Azazel wilderness goat. And the people picked Yeshua as the sacrificial goat. And the Azazel goat, Barabbas, was set free. This is when Yeshua took on the appearance of the foolish, worthless shepherd, the goat, Azazel. Matthew 27, verse 17. You see, Yeshua, all the sacrifices were pointing to Yeshua. He was, or is, the spotless lamb. He is the Lord's goat of atonement. He is the lamb standing before the throne in Revelation, worthy, and who has the authority to redeem the earth. And of course, he is the one who will be crowned king and judge of Jehovah's creation at the coronation ceremony in Revelation 7. So, once before Yeshua took on the equipment or appearance of a foolish, worthless shepherd, Azazel is the foolish, worthless shepherd. One came and brought all the sins to the earth. The other came to take all the sins out of the earth. So, this is what the ceremony of the casting of the lots represented. The Lord's goat and the Azazel goat. Now, when the Azazel goat had been selected, this red piece of wool was tied to its horns. And then the high priest would do something very interesting. The high priest would ascribe all of Israel's sin to this goat, who was then banished into the wilderness. It was to be tied up and left in the wilderness. Although, at some point, the tradition was changed, and instead of just being tied up and left in the wilderness, the Azazel goat was thrown off a cliff and killed. Interestingly enough, the piece of wool tied to its head also had a piece tied to the door of the temple. And after the Azazel goat had been killed or tied up and left in the wilderness, the red piece of wool tied to the temple door would turn white, indicating to the priests and to the people of Israel that their sins had been atoned for. This goat, the Azazel goat, represented something, stood for something. Yeshua, the high priest, will one day cast Azazel, the Islamic false prophet, into the abyss, the bottomless pit. So, the Azazel goat, bound in the wilderness, symbolic perhaps? And then Isaiah tells us, Isaiah 7 verse 18 tells us about the fly from Egypt. So where can we get more information about this fly that dwells in the furthest parts, the land of Egypt? The book of Enoch tells a very interesting story, which is similar to the one told in the book of Jude, however, with a lot more detail. Enoch 7 verse 1 to 2. It happened after the sons of men had multiplied in those days that daughters were born to them, elegant and beautiful. And when the angels, the sons of heaven, beheld them, they became enamored of them, saying to each other, Come, let us select for ourselves wives from the progeny of men, and let us begat children. Then their leader, Semyaza, said to them, I fear that you may perhaps be indisposed to the performance of this enterprise, and that I alone shall suffer for so grievous a crime. But they answered him and said, We all swear and bind ourselves by mutual execrations that we will not change our intention, but execute our projected undertaking. Enoch 7 verse 7 and 8. Then they swore all together and all bound themselves by mutual execrations. Their whole number was 200 who descended upon Ardis, which is the top of Mount Hermon. That mountain therefore was called Hermon or Hermon, because they had sworn upon it and bound themselves by mutual execrations. These are the names of the chiefs: Semyaza, who was their leader, Urka, Bermel, Achibel, Tamiel, Ramuel, Danel, Eskiel, Saraknael, Asnael, Amers, Batral, Ananan, Zavabi, Samzavil, Ertael, Turael, Yom Yael, Arzael, These were the prefects of the 200 angels, and the remainder were all with them. Then they took wives, each choosing for himself, whom they began to approach, and with whom they cohabited, teaching them sorcery, incantations, and the divining of roots and trees. And the women conceived, brought forth giants, whose stature was each 300 cubits. These devoured all which the labor of men produced, until it became impossible to feed them. When they turned themselves against men in order to devour them, and began to injure birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, to eat their flesh one after another, and to drink their blood. Then the earth reproved the unrighteousness. Moreover, Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, breastplates, the fabrication of mirrors, and the workmanship of bracelets and ornaments, the use of paint, the beautification of the eyebrows, the use of stones of every valuable and select kind, and of all sorts of dyes, so that the world became altered. Impiety increased, fornication multiplied, and they transgressed and corrupted all their ways. Amazraach taught all the sorcerers and dividers of roots. Armers taught the solution of sorcery. Barkael taught the observers of the stars. Achibel taught science. Tamiel taught astronomy. And Azaradel taught the motion of the moon. And men being destroyed cried out, and their voice reached to heaven. Then Michael and Gabriel and Raphael, Suriel and Uriel looked down from heaven and saw the quantity of blood which was shed on earth, and all the iniquity which was done unto it, and said one to another, It is the voice of their cries. The earth, deprived of her children, has cried even to the gates of heaven. And now to you, O ye holy ones of heaven, the souls of men complain, saying, Obtain justice for us with one, the Most High. Then they said to the Lord, the King, Thou art Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings. The throne of thy glory is forever and ever, and forever and ever is thy name sanctified and glorified. Thou art blessed and glorified. Thou hast made all things. Thou possessest power over all things, and all things are open and manifest before thee. Thou beholdest all things, and nothing can be concealed from thee. Thou hast seen what Azazel has done, how he has taught every species of iniquity upon earth, and has disclosed to the world all the secret things which are done in the heavens. Semiaza also has taught sorcery, to whom thou hast given authority over those who are associated with him, They have gone together to the daughters of men, have lain with them, have become polluted, and have discovered crimes to them. The women likewise have brought forth giants. Thus has the whole earth been filled with blood and with iniquity. And now, behold, the souls of those who are dead cry out, and complain even to the gates of heaven. Their groaning ascends, nor can they escape from the unrighteousness which is committed on the earth. Thou knowest all things before they exist. Thou knowest these things, and what has been done by them. Yet thou dost not speak to us. What on account of these things ought we to do to them? Then the Most High, the Great and Holy One, spoke and sent Azazel to the son of Lamech. Say to him in my name, conceal thyself. Then explain to him the consummation which is about to take place. For all the earth shall perish, the waters of a deluge shall come over the whole earth, and all things which are in it shall be destroyed. And now teach him how he may escape, and how his seed may remain in all the earth. Again the Lord said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot, cast him into darkness, and opening the desert which is in Dudael, cast him in there. Throw upon him hurled and pointed stones, covering him with darkness. So Azazel is bound hand and foot, cast into darkness, as is stated in the book of Jude, in an opening in the desert which is called Dudael. And he has pointed stones hurled upon him, covering him with darkness. So, Isaiah tells us that there will be an entity summoned that dwells in the furthest parts of the rivers of Egypt. We are told that Azazel is cast in the wilderness, Dudael, and has jagged stones placed upon him, and he is in darkness. Interestingly enough, there is a place at the very end of Egypt, close to the border, not too far away from the rivers of Egypt, a place called Naphtaliah. And in this place called Naphtaliah, which is close to the furthest parts of Egypt and close to the furthest parts of the rivers of Egypt, there is a formation of jagged rocks in the wilderness. Could this be Dudael? Could this be where Azazel is bound? Could this be from where Azazel will emerge when he is summoned, as we are told in Isaiah 7, verse 18? There shall he remain forever, cover his face that he may not see the light. And in the great day of judgment let him be cast into the fire. So who is cast into the fire when the Lord comes? The Antichrist and the false prophet. We've already identified the Antichrist. He is the bee that dwells in the land of Assyria. So it looks or seems as though the false prophet, or shall I say, the spirit behind the false prophet, is this Azazel. And it makes sense because the false prophet is the enforcer, Isa, the one who comes to slaughter those who do not believe in the Antichrist. Funny how Azazel taught men to slay one another, taught them how to use swords. And in the great day of judgment, let him be cast into the fire. Restore the earth which the angels have corrupted, and announce life to it, and that I may revive it. All the sons of men shall not perish in consequence of every secret by which the watchers have destroyed, and which they have taught their offspring. All the earth has been corrupted by the efforts of the teachings of the worthless shepherd, the teachings of Azazel. To him, therefore, ascribe the whole crime. Now, do you see why the high priest ascribes all sin to the Azazel goat during the ceremony at Yom Kippur? To Gabriel also the Lord said, go to the bitters, to the reprobates, to the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication, the offsprings of the watchers, from among men, bringing them forth bring them forth and excite them one against another. Let them perish by mutual slaughter, for length of days shall not be theirs. So, Azazel is chained and kept alive in the abyss, and will one day be released. Azazel has many names. Now, if we examine the name of Azazel and the characters, so we have the letter Ayin, which stands for eye or watch or watcher. So, the watcher. Then we have Zion, which speaks of weaponry. So perhaps a watcher who brought knowledge of weaponry. Azazel is also a chief, a strong one, as we saw earlier. Aleph, the leader of the watchers. Another Zion who brings knowledge of violence and weaponry. And then ends with a Lamed. He's a shepherd. He is a teacher, as the Lamed stands for, the shepherd, the staff, to teach. So the watcher who teaches men knowledge of weaponry and violence, the false, worthless shepherd, Azazel, the one who has many names. He's also known as Baphomet. Azazel, Belzebob, Baphomet, Prince of the Abyss. Matthew 12, verse 24. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall hiss, he shall summon for the fly that is in the uttermost parts of the rivers of Egypt. Isaiah 7, verse 18a. And Azazel is represented in the stars as the constellation Capricorn. So, when people talk about who is the Antichrist and who is the false prophet, well, the Antichrist is Cain, who is currently in the abyss, and the false prophet is Azazel, who is also currently in the abyss. And they will not be allowed to come on the earth until the church is taken out. And I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Matthew 16, verse 18 and 19. So you see, the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. Gates represents access. In other words, the inhabitants of hell will not be allowed to come upon the earth until the church of Jesus has been taken out. So when people talk about the Antichrist, it is absolutely impossible for the Antichrist to come upon the earth whilst the church is still on the earth, as Yeshua promised. So you see that it doesn't make sense that the rider on the white horse is the Antichrist, because the rider on the white horse comes with the covenants with many, arrives during the first Revelation 12 sign, and comes with a covenant, the bow. However, the Antichrist will come and confirm the covenant. The covenant doesn't originate with him. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. This is the false prophet now, and this is after the rapture. And he had two horns like a lamb, you see, because he wants to be like Yeshua. He pretends to be like Yeshua. And he spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Revelation 13, verses 11 and 12. This is why the Bible says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Ephesians 6, verse 12. It is out of the abyss that this false prophet, Azazel, Esau, will rise, out of the state of occultation, out of the abyss. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord will whistle for the fly that is in the furthest part of the rivers of Egypt. He will emerge from the wilderness. And that is why Yeshua said, "So if they say to you, 'Look, he, Yeshua, is in the desert,' the wilderness, do not go out or look. He is in the inner rooms." The false prophet will point to the Mahdi and say that he is the Messiah. Isa, the false prophet, the Lamb, who in actual fact has the spirit of the dragon behind him. You see, the real Lamb is Yeshua, Jesus. John 1, verse 29. And the false Lamb is Isa, the Islamic Jesus, in inverted commas. Revelation 13, verse 11 to 18. One lamb brought all the sins in the world, Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. And the other takes away the sins of the world, Yeshua. The false prophet. So, these are the two entities who will be summoned at the end. Behemoth, false prophet, Leviathan, the Antichrist. The similarities between the Antichrist of the Bible and Al-Mahdi. The Antichrist will be head of a one world government. The Mahdi will be the head of a one world government. The Antichrist leads one world religion. The Mahdi sets up Islam as a one world religion. The Antichrist confirms a 7-year treaty with many. The Mahdi upholds a 7-year treaty. The Antichrist rules for approximately 7 years. The Mahdi rules for approximately 7 years. The similarities are uncanny. The Antichrist is not the rider on the white horse, as depicted in Revelation 7. That is, Donald Trump comes with the covenant. The Antichrist confirms the covenant. He doesn't originate the covenant. He invades and conquers Israel halfway into the time of Jacob's trouble. Al-Mahdi invades and conquers Israel and Jerusalem. He rules from Jerusalem, the Antichrist. Al-Mahdi rules from Jerusalem. Targets and persecutes Christians and Jews who do not convert. That's the Antichrist. And Al-Mahdi focuses his conversion efforts on Jews and Christians and kills those who do not convert. The Antichrist changes the laws and calendar. Al-Mahdi implements Sharia law and uses the Islamic calendar. The Antichrist is assisted by the false prophet. Al-Mahdi is assisted by Isa, Azazel. The Antichrist is granted supernatural powers from Satan to perform signs and wonders. Al-Mahdi granted supernatural powers by Allah to perform signs and wonders. The Antichrist arrives on the scene during a period of great turmoil caused by war, crime, natural disasters, and religious apostasy. Al-Mahdi arrives on the scene during a period of great turmoil caused by war, crime, natural disasters, and religious apostasy. The false prophet and Isa, the Islamic Jesus, governs alongside the Antichrist, governs alongside the Mahdi. Subordinate to the Antichrist, subordinate to the Mahdi. The chief enforcer of the Antichrist policies, laws, and religion. The chief enforcer of the Mahdi's policies, Sharia law, and Islamic religion, serves as the executioner for Jews and Christians who do not convert. Serves as the executioner for Jews and Christians who do not convert. A descriptive clue as to his identity is given as a dragon in sheep's clothing. The Islamic Jesus claims to be Jesus, the Lamb, but acts to the contrary. The false prophet abolishes Christianity, Judaism, and all other religions. Islamic Isa abolishes Christianity, Judaism, and all other religions. These are the entities who will be summoned before Yeshua makes his appearance. And Yeshua will manifest on the earth on the 1st of Elul, 5783. And he will have with him the 144,000 first fruit warriors at the time of Jacob's trouble, and the two witnesses, Moses and Elijah, who stood with him during the transformation of the Mount of Transfiguration, and who witnessed the Lord say, "This is my son. Listen to him." They will say to everyone, "This is Yeshua, the true Messiah." And this brings us to the end of this installment of the original spiritual Game of Thrones. Thank you for listening. Do like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you at the next installment. I am a watchman, blowing the horn as loudly as I can. And I'm out.